Why does giving an avoidant person space actually make them pull away even more? It seems like the right move. Things get intense, they say they need distance, and you respect that by backing off. But then they disappear completely. The connection you built just vanishes. What felt like respect for their boundaries somehow pushed them further away. Today, you'll understand the big lie behind needing space, why avoidants use this excuse to protect themselves, and the three-step method that either saves or destroys the relationship. Most relationship advice says avoidant people need space because closeness scares them. The guidance is always the same. Back off, give them room, wait patiently for them to come back. This sounds respectful and reasonable, but it misses what's actually happening inside their brain and body when they pull away. Avoidant patterns start in childhood. Kids develop this style when their emotional needs consistently go unmet. Their parents or caregivers are physically there but emotionally distant. The child learns that asking for comfort or connection leads to disappointment or rejection. So they adapt by stopping themselves from needing anything from others. Over time, this becomes automatic. Their brain wires itself to see closeness as dangerous, not because intimacy is actually threatening, but because being vulnerable in the past always led to pain. This wiring stays active in adulthood. It runs in the background, triggering automatic defenses when connection gets too deep. The pulling away pattern follows the same steps every time. When emotional closeness crosses a certain line, their brain and body react like they're in danger. Even if they consciously know the relationship is healthy, their nervous system doesn't care. It sees threat and activates protection mode. A chain reaction starts. They suddenly remember why independence matters so much. They focus hard on their partner's flaws. They feel a strong urge to reconnect with ex-partners or chase new people. These aren't planned manipulations. They're automatic defenses their system learned decades ago to keep them safe. The protocol for handling this has 3 essential parts. They must happen in a specific order. Getting the order wrong causes more damage than doing nothing at all. The first part is keeping your own emotions stable without making their withdrawal about you. When someone pulls away, anxiety floods in naturally. Questions take over your mind. What did I do wrong? Do they still care? Is this relationship over? These feelings are completely valid, but acting from this anxious place pushes them further into shutdown mode. Their system is already in threat mode. Anxious pursuit confirms what their brain believes. Closeness equals danger and loss of freedom. Keeping stable means living your actual life with real investment, not as a game to make them jealous or prove you're independent. Go to the gym because movement helps your stress, not to show you're fine without them. Spend time with friends because those connections matter, not to demonstrate you have other options. Do your hobbies and chase your goals because they genuinely mean something to you. This isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about refusing to abandon yourself while someone else works through their process. Their system can tell the difference between real stability and fake indifference. Only the real version creates the safety they need to move back toward connection. The second part involves strategic contact that keeps the connection alive without applying pressure. This is where most people make one of 2 mistakes. They either completely disappear, thinking space means total silence, or they overcorrect by constantly checking in, which feels like pursuit. Neither works because both confirm their fears. Total silence confirms their belief that people leave when things get real. This reinforces their need to protect themselves. Constant contact confirms that closeness means losing their independence and drowning in someone else's needs. Strategic contact means brief, warm interactions that show continued interest without expecting anything back. A simple text about something they mentioned caring about. Sharing an article related to their interests. Mentioning a funny moment from earlier in the relationship. These touch points should genuinely focus on them as a person, not hidden attempts to restart conversation or get reassurance. Timing matters too. One genuine touch point every few days maintains connection without pressure. More frequent contact starts feeling like pursuit, which reactivates their defenses. The third part is the most counterintuitive piece. Most people skip it entirely, which is why their attempts fail even when they do everything else right. After keeping stable and maintaining minimal contact for a period, usually 1 to 2 weeks depending on the relationship's history, you need a direct but gentle conversation about the pattern itself. Not this specific instance of withdrawal. The broader pattern that keeps happening. This conversation isn't about demanding explanations or expressing hurt feelings, although those emotions are completely valid. It's about naming the pattern you've observed in a neutral, curious way that invites thinking rather than defensiveness. Something like noticing that when connection deepens, there seems to be a predictable shift where distance suddenly feels necessary, and wondering if they've noticed this pattern in their relationships generally. How you frame this matters enormously. Approaching it as a shared problem to understand together rather than something they're doing wrong creates the safety needed for actual dialogue. Most advice about avoidant attachment stops at giving space. This is why so many people stay stuck in painful cycles with partners who keep leaving and returning. Space by itself isn't the solution. Space without the other parts just lets them calm their system back down. Then they often return to the relationship until the cycle repeats. Nothing changes because nothing was addressed. The relationship becomes a loop. Closeness, withdrawal, return. Closeness, withdrawal, return. Each cycle erodes trust and security for both people. Understanding what's actually needed requires looking at how these patterns develop originally. Children who become avoidantly attached learn that expressing needs leads to rejection or disappointment. They don't learn that needs themselves are bad. They learn that showing needs to others creates problems. So the solution becomes handling everything independently. This shapes their entire relationship blueprint. As adults, they're not afraid of intimacy itself. They're afraid of the vulnerability that comes with depending on someone, because historically, vulnerability meant pain. When they pull away, they're not consciously deciding to create distance. Their nervous system is running an automatic program designed to protect them from the vulnerability that deeper closeness requires. They might explain it as needing space, focusing on their goals, or questioning compatibility. But beneath these conscious explanations is a system desperately trying to restore balance by reducing emotional exposure. The thoughts that arise during withdrawal. Focusing on flaws. Remembering past independence. Idealizing previous relationships. These aren't accurate reflections of their real feelings. They're defensive mechanisms their brain generates to justify the distance their body is demanding. The partner watching someone withdraw faces their own challenge. Watching someone pull away without clear explanation triggers abandonment fears. This is especially true for people with anxious attachment patterns. The urge to pursue, to fix things, to get reassurance that everything's okay, these impulses are powerful and completely understandable. Acting on them, however, creates exactly the dynamic their system is trying to escape. Pursuit confirms that closeness means losing independence and being overwhelmed by someone else's emotional needs. It pushes them further into withdrawal. This creates a pursue-withdraw cycle that becomes increasingly painful for everyone involved. Breaking this cycle requires both people to do something different. But the non-avoidant partner has to move first because they're typically the one with more awareness of the pattern. This doesn't mean the burden falls entirely on them. It doesn't mean the avoidant person isn't responsible for their patterns. It means someone has to interrupt the cycle. The person with more insight into what's happening is better positioned to make that interruption. The stability part of the protocol addresses the pursue-withdraw dynamic directly. When the non-avoidant partner keeps genuine emotional stability and continues investing in their own life, it communicates something their system needs to hear. This person won't abandon themselves for the relationship. Closeness doesn't mean losing identity. Vulnerability doesn't create the same dangers it did in childhood. This can't be performed or faked. Their system has decades of experience detecting fake behavior. It will interpret performed stability as manipulation, which deepens distrust. The contact part keeps the relationship alive during the withdrawal period without triggering more shutdown. Complete silence lets them rationalize the distance. They tell themselves the relationship wasn't that important anyway. They start rebuilding the walls that intimacy had begun to soften. Constant contact confirms their fear that closeness means being consumed. Brief, genuine touch points that acknowledge them as a person without demanding reciprocation thread this needle. They maintain connection without creating pressure. They communicate continued interest without pursuit. They give their system evidence that this relationship might be different from their historical pattern. The conversation part addresses the core issue that space alone never resolves. Avoidant patterns are automatic and unconscious. Without bringing awareness to the pattern itself, nothing changes. The person pulls away, regulates through distance, feels safe enough to return, gets close again, pulls away again. Each cycle reinforces the pattern rather than resolving it. The conversation interrupts this loop by making the pattern visible and inviting collaborative understanding rather than individual management. Timing this conversation correctly determines whether it opens dialogue or triggers more withdrawal. Too early, while they're still in active shutdown, and their system reads it as confrontation or demand. This pushes them further away. Too late, after they've fully returned to baseline, and they minimize the pattern or struggle to access what was happening during withdrawal. The window is typically 1 to 2 weeks into the withdrawal period. The initial shutdown has run its course, but complete disconnection hasn't set in yet. They're calm enough to think, but still in touch with what triggered the distance. The specific words used in this conversation make an enormous difference. Accusatory framing, like pointing out that they always run when things get real, activates defensiveness. It confirms their fear that vulnerability leads to criticism. Victim framing, like expressing how much their withdrawal hurts, triggers guilt that increases their urge to create distance. Curious, observational framing that names the pattern neutrally creates space for reflection. Acknowledging that closeness seems to trigger a predictable shift toward distance. Wondering if this is a familiar pattern. Asking if they've noticed it in past relationships. These approaches invite exploration rather than defense. Many people resist having this conversation because it feels like forcing something or not respecting boundaries. This concern makes sense in a culture that emphasizes giving space and not being needy, but it confuses emotional pursuit with honest communication. Pursuing someone who's withdrawn by constantly checking in, expressing anxiety, or trying to force reassurance is indeed problematic. It pushes them away. Naming an observable pattern and inviting dialogue about it is fundamentally different. One seeks to extract comfort and validation. The other seeks to understand and address a dynamic that's affecting both people. The outcome of this conversation varies depending on their level of self-awareness and willingness to work on their patterns. Some people have done significant personal work. They recognize their pulling away tendencies. They might feel relieved that someone sees the pattern and wants to navigate it together rather than either pursuing anxiously or giving up. Others have less awareness and might feel defensive or confused. They can't see the pattern being described. Still others recognize the pattern but aren't ready or willing to address it. They prefer to stay in familiar territory, even if it means cycling through relationships. How they respond to this conversation reveals crucial information about relationship viability. Someone who can acknowledge the pattern, express willingness to work on it, and follow through with actual changes over time is demonstrating the capacity for secure relationship. Changes might include noticing when shutdown starts, communicating about it instead of just withdrawing, staying present through discomfort, actively working on tolerating deeper closeness. Progress isn't linear and setbacks happen, but the overall trajectory moves toward more connection and less defensive withdrawal. Someone who consistently denies the pattern, becomes defensive when it's mentioned, or acknowledges it but makes no effort to change is showing that they're not ready for secure relationship right now. This isn't a moral failing but a reality about where they are in their growth. Staying in relationship with someone who can't or won't address their avoidant patterns means signing up for repeated cycles of closeness and withdrawal. This gradually erodes the non-avoidant partner's sense of security and self-worth. At some point, accepting the pattern means accepting that the relationship will always operate within the constraints of one person's unmanaged attachment wounds. The cultural narrative around avoidant attachment often frames it as something partners must endlessly accommodate, as if respecting someone's attachment style means never addressing how it impacts the relationship. This misunderstands both attachment theory and healthy relationship dynamics. Attachment styles describe patterns, not fixed identities. They're learned responses that can change with awareness and effort. Secure attachment isn't something people are born with. It's something they develop through experiences of consistent, attuned care. In adulthood, through intentional work on their relational patterns. Accommodating attachment styles doesn't mean accepting harmful dynamics without addressing them. It means understanding where patterns come from, approaching them with compassion rather than judgment, creating conditions that support growth rather than reinforce wounds. For avoidant patterns, this means providing the stability and patience needed for someone to risk deeper vulnerability, while also maintaining clear boundaries about what's acceptable in the relationship. It means being willing to navigate their discomfort with closeness without abandoning your own needs for consistency and emotional presence. The specific protocol outlined here, maintaining stability plus strategic contact plus direct conversation, works because it addresses what their nervous system actually needs rather than what common sense suggests. Common sense says, give them space, and they'll come back when ready. This is partially true but incomplete. They might come back, but without addressing the underlying pattern, they'll leave again when intimacy deepens. The cycle continues indefinitely, unless someone interrupts it with a different approach. Stability addresses their fear that closeness means losing self and being consumed by another's needs. Strategic contact addresses their conflicting need for connection despite their defenses. Conversation addresses the pattern itself, bringing consciousness to what's been operating automatically. Together, these parts create conditions where they can begin developing new relational patterns, where vulnerability doesn't automatically trigger withdrawal, where closeness can deepen without activating threat responses. This process isn't quick or easy. Avoidant patterns develop over years or decades. Changing them requires consistent, patient effort from both people. The non-avoidant partner maintains their boundaries and emotional stability while staying present through the other person's discomfort. The avoidant person does the harder work of staying present through their own discomfort, resisting the urge to create distance when intimacy triggers their defenses. Building capacity to tolerate vulnerability. Both people work on understanding the pattern and interrupting it when it starts, rather than letting it run its automatic course. Success isn't measured by the complete elimination of withdrawal impulses. It's measured by how both people handle them when they arise. Can the avoidant person notice the urge to withdraw and communicate about it instead of just disappearing? Can the non-avoidant partner stay grounded when withdrawal happens instead of pursuing anxiously or shutting down? Does the couple develop shared language for what's happening and tools for navigating it together? These markers indicate movement toward secure functioning, even if the underlying attachment patterns haven't fully transformed. The question of whether to stay in relationship with someone who has avoidant patterns depends entirely on their response to awareness and their willingness to work on change. Avoidant attachment itself isn't a deal breaker. Many people with avoidant tendencies develop secure relationships through consistent effort and self-awareness. The deal breaker is unwillingness to acknowledge patterns or make genuine efforts to change them. A relationship where one person continuously withdraws without awareness or effort to do differently becomes a relationship where the other person continuously abandons themselves trying to maintain connection. That dynamic erodes both people over time. The big lie about avoidant space isn't that space is never needed or helpful. Sometimes people do need time to process, to regulate their emotions, to think through complex feelings. The lie is that space alone resolves avoidant patterns, that giving someone room to withdraw and waiting for them to return creates lasting change. It doesn't. Space without the other parts just allows the pattern to run its course and reset for the next cycle. Real change requires bringing awareness to automatic patterns, creating safety for vulnerability. Both people doing the work to build something different from what their nervous systems learned to expect from relationships. If you're dealing with someone who withdraws when things get close, try the 3-part protocol. Maintain your own stability without making their withdrawal about you. Keep brief contact that preserves connection without pressure. Have a direct conversation about the pattern itself after 1 to 2 weeks. The outcome of that conversation tells you what's actually possible in this relationship. Leave a comment sharing your experience navigating avoidant patterns. If this video helped you understand what's really happening during those withdrawal periods, hit the like button and subscribe for more content on attachment and relationship dynamics. Thanks for watching.